I spent years paying off my parents' medical bills, working 3 jobs to keep them afloat. But when I accidentally saw my mother's phone, she was bragging to her Bookie about her daughter. The perfect, bottomless ATM who doesn't know the cancer was a lie. The scent of industrial-grade ammonia had become my personal perfume, a sharp, stinging cloud that followed me from the darkened offices of downtown to the fluorescent aisles of the supermarket. It was 4:30 a.m., and the silence of the city felt heavy, like a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders as I pushed a heavy buffing machine across a marble lobby. My spine made a sound like dry kindling snapping every time I leaned into the handle. I was 34 years old, but in the reflection of the glass doors, I saw a woman who looked 50, hollow-cheeked, eyes shadowed by a permanent gray exhaustion, and hair pulled back into a fraying knot. I didn't recognize myself anymore, but I didn't care. Recognition was a luxury I couldn't afford. Every square inch of floor I polished represented another $5 toward the German specialized enzymes Mom said were the only thing keeping her tumors from metastasizing. By 8 a.m. I was sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot, my second home. I had exactly 7 minutes before my retail shift started. I spent 4 of them rubbing peppermint oil into my temples to kill a burgeoning migraine and the other 3 staring at a crumpled picture of Mom from 5 years ago. She looked so vibrant then. Now, according to her, she was a flickering candle in a windstorm. I grabbed a bruised apple from the passenger seat, my breakfast and lunch combined, and stepped out into the heat. The pavement shimmered, the sun mocking my lack of sleep. Just 10 more hours, I whispered to the steering wheel. 10 hours of smiling at strangers and then 6 hours of data entry, and you'll have enough for the rent and the infusions for the month. I was a machine fueled by guilt and a desperate, clawing love. The memory of the day the world stopped was what kept the gears turning. It had been a Tuesday, a day so unremarkable until the moment I walked into the living room and saw the manila folder. Mom hadn't been herself for weeks, or so I thought, complaining of fatigue and a dull ache in her side. When she showed me the official diagnosis, typed on letterhead that looked terrifyingly professional, my knees had actually hit the floor. Stage 3. The words felt like a physical blow to my throat. She didn't cry. She just stared out the window at the rain, her voice trembling as she talked about the radical treatments that insurance wouldn't touch. "I don't want to be a burden, Sarah," she had whimpered, clutching my hand with a grip that felt like a drowning person's. "Maybe it's just my time." I had roared back against that idea with everything I had. I promised her right then, amidst the smell of damp wool and old tea, that I would move mountains. I didn't know I was actually digging my own grave. As the months bled into years, my life became a series of subtractions. First went the gym membership, then the weekend trips with friends, and finally the friends themselves. I remembered the last time my best girlfriend, Elena, had tried to stage an intervention. We were sitting in a coffee shop. I had ordered tap water because I couldn't justify $5 on a latte, and she told me I was disappearing. "You're a ghost, Sarah. You're working yourself to death for a woman who won't even go to a second opinion doctor." I had flared up in a defensive rage, accusing her of being heartless. I didn't tell her that my emergency savings account, the one I'd built over a decade for a house down payment, was down to $14.32. I didn't tell her I was wearing 2 pairs of socks to hide the holes in my sneakers. I just walked out, choosing my mother's survival over my own sanity. The physical reality of my 3-job life was a slow-motion car crash. Between the cleaning, the retail, and the midnight data entry for a logistics firm, I was lucky to get 4 hours of broken sleep. My skin had taken on a translucent, sickly quality, and my fingernails were bitten down to the quick. One afternoon at the store, I had fainted while stocking the bottom shelf of the cereal aisle. My manager had been kind, offering me a chair and a soda, but all I could think about was the 15 minutes of pay I was losing. I lied and told him it was just the heat, then went right back to lifting 20-pound boxes. I couldn't afford a weak day. If I stumbled, Mom fell. That was the math I lived by, a cold binary equation that left no room for error. Mom, meanwhile, had curated the perfect environment of a sick room. The house always smelled of eucalyptus and expensive healing candles I bought to soothe her respiratory system. She had started wearing silk turbans, claiming her hair was coming out in clumps, though I never actually saw the bald spots. She said it was too degrading to show me. I spent my few hours at home hovering over her, bringing her trays of organic bone broth and expensive supplements. I felt like a guardian angel, a martyr for the woman who had given me life. I'd watch her struggle to sit up, her face pinched in a mask of simulated agony, and I would feel a surge of such intense protective sorrow that I'd have to leave the room to cry. The incidents of near misses should have woken me up. There was the time I found a receipt for an expensive French restaurant in the trash, and she claimed a charity worker had taken her out to cheer her up. Or the time I saw her walking toward the mailbox with a stride that looked remarkably strong, only for her to collapse back into a limp the second she heard my car in the driveway. I ignored it all. I told myself my mind was playing tricks because I was so tired. I chose to believe the lie because the truth, that I was destroying my life for a fantasy, was too much to bear. I was invested. I had spent my youth, my health, and my future on her cancer. I couldn't afford for it to be anything else. One evening, about a week before the phone discovery, I was sitting on the floor by her recliner. I was exhausted, my eyes blurring as I tried to read the fine print on a new alternative medicine pamphlet she wanted me to fund. The house was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the clock I'd bought her for her birthday. I started massaging her calves, feeling the tension in her muscles. Tension she claimed was from nerve damage. I looked up at her, my heart full of a twisted kind of pride. "We're going to beat this, Mom," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. She reached down and patted my head, a thin, sickly smile on her face. "You're such a good girl, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that I now realize was pure venom. "I don't know what I'd do without my little Atum." I laughed it off then, thinking it was just a joke from a woman tired of being sick. I didn't realize she was telling me exactly who she was. The steam from the bathroom began to curl under the door, carrying the scent of the expensive, imported eucalyptus soap I'd bought to help her breathe. I sat on the edge of her bed, my joints throbbing from the day's third shift, waiting to help her dry her hair. Her phone, resting on the nightstand atop a stack of fake medical pamphlets, began to vibrate. It wasn't just a single ping. It was a frantic rhythmic staccato that cut through the quiet of the room. My first thought wasn't suspicion, it was terror. I assumed it was the midnight results from the experimental lab in the city, or perhaps a nurse calling with a crisis. My hands, still stained with the faint scent of the office floor wax from my dawn shift, trembled as I reached for the device. I only wanted to see if I needed to call an ambulance. The lock screen was bypassed with a simple swipe. She had never bothered with a passcode, likely because she thought I was too broken by exhaustion to ever look. The name at the top of the notifications wasn't Dr. Eris or Oncology Center. It was Big Al. The message preview was a string of aggressive capital letters. "Lucky number 7 Ian the 5th. You owe me 5 large by Monday, Marge. Don't make me come to the house." I stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process the words. 5 large was $5,000. That was exactly the amount I had withdrawn from my meager 401k liquidation 2 days ago. Money I had handed over in a trembling envelope so she could pay for her stage 3 specialized immunotherapy. I felt a cold, oily sensation slide down my spine. With a thumb that felt heavy as lead, I tapped into the message thread. I didn't find medical records. I found a digital ledger of a life I didn't recognize. Big Al wasn't a doctor, he was a bookie. The conversation went back months, a sickening tapestry of point spreads, trifectas, and sure things on horses with names like Golden Heist and Final Bet. The deeper I scrolled, the more the air seemed to leave the room. I found a message sent just 3 hours ago, while I was scrubbing toilets at the accounting firm. My mother had sent a photo of the envelope of cash I'd given her. My life savings, my blood, my sweat. Beneath the photo she had typed, "Here's the buy-in for the weekend. The ATM just did a fresh payout. She's a bit tired today, but she never says no to her poor sick mama. Put it all on Red Vengeance in the third." The words "the ATM" felt like a physical brand against my skin. I scrolled further back, my eyes burning. I found a group chat with 3 other women, her book club friends who I thought were bringing her prayer cards and casseroles. One of them had asked, "Marge, how are you going to cover the loss from Tuesday? That's a lot of scratch." My mother's reply was a masterpiece of malice. "Don't worry. I'll just tell Sarah the cancer has migrated to the lymph nodes. She'll work a double shift at the store to cover the new biopsy. She's so gullible it's almost sad. She actually cried when I faked a coughing fit this morning." I stopped breathing. The room began to spin, the walls closing in. Every memory of the last 3 years began to reconfigure itself, snapping into a new hideous shape. I remembered the Tuesday she mentioned. The day I had skipped lunch and walked 3 miles in the rain because I couldn't afford gas, all to make sure she had her pain medication. I remembered her nausea on Wednesday mornings, which I had spent hours comforting her through, rubbing her back and bringing her ginger tea. Looking at the messages now, I saw the truth. The nausea wasn't from chemotherapy. It was a hangover from the gin and tonics she'd shared with her gambling ring while I was out cleaning grease traps. I saw a photo she had sent to Big Al of a medical bill I had paid. It was a forgery. She had used a basic computer program to overlay the hospital's logo onto a fake invoice. She had even joked about how easy it was to fool me. "She doesn't even check the math," Mom had written. "She's too busy trying to be the perfect daughter." I should have started this scam years ago. Small incidents that I had dismissed as my own paranoia suddenly blazed with clarity. I remembered finding a casino player's club card in the pocket of her sick robe 6 months ago. She had told me it belonged to a friend and she was just holding it. I had believed her because I couldn't imagine a mother doing this to her child. I remembered the relapse she had last summer, right when I was about to go on a single tiny weekend getaway with a friend. I had canceled the trip and spent the money on her emergency consult. Now I saw the text to Big Al from that same weekend. "Stayed home to watch the Derby. Had to kill the kids' vacation to cover the vig, but the house is quiet and the gin is cold." The betrayal was a jagged glass shards in my chest. I thought of the man I had lost, David. I had pushed him away because he had dared to suggest that my mother seemed healthier than she claimed. I had called him cruel. I had defended the woman who was currently singing a show tune in the shower, using the steam to open up lungs that were perfectly healthy. I looked at my hands, red, raw and calloused. I looked at the worn-out sneakers on my feet with the holes in the soles. I had sacrificed my youth, my love and my health to fund a gambling addiction masked as a terminal illness. A sudden violent urge to scream clawed at my throat, but I forced it down. I heard the water click off. The pipes groaned, the same pipes I had paid a plumber to fix last month by taking an extra Sunday shift at the warehouse. I heard her humming, the sound of a woman without a care in the world. I looked at the phone one last time. There was a message from a woman named Joyce. "Marge, what if she finds out? What if she stops paying?" My mother's response: "She won't. I've got her wrapped around my finger. As long as I keep wearing the headscarves and looking pale, she'll keep the money coming. She needs to feel like a hero. It's a win-win." I carefully, silently placed the phone back on the nightstand, exactly as I had found it. I smoothed out the fake medical pamphlets. My heart, which had been racing like a trapped bird, suddenly went cold and still. The grief, the agonizing fear that I was losing my mother, evaporated, replaced by a crystalline, freezing rage. It was the kind of anger that didn't need to shout. It was the kind of anger that planned. The bathroom door creaked open. Mom stepped out, wrapped in her fluffy white robe, her silk headscarf perfectly positioned to suggest a frail dignity. She leaned heavily against the doorframe, letting out a soft, rehearsed wince. "Oh, Sarah, honey," she whispered, her voice a fragile reed. "The steam helped, but I feel so lightheaded. I think the cancer is taking a lot out of me today. Do you think you could skip your nap and help me with some tea? And maybe we should talk about that new clinic in Switzerland. They sent me a brochure." I looked at her. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't see a patient. I didn't see a victim. I saw a predator in a silk turban. I saw a con artist who had watched me wither away so she could play the ponies. I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. A sharp, dangerous thing she didn't recognize. "Of course, Mom," I said, my voice as smooth as glass. "Let's talk about the money. I think it's time we really looked at the books." As I walked past her to the kitchen, I wasn't the bottomless A-team anymore. I was the one holding the cards, and for the first time in this long, miserable game, I was the one who was going to decide when the payout ended. I watched her through the steam of the herbal tea I'd just brewed, my hands steady despite the roar of adrenaline beneath my skin. She took a sip, her pinky finger extended in that delicate, practiced way of hers, looking for all the world like a woman at death's door rather than a woman who had just bet my rent on a greyhound. For the next 7 days I became the finest actress I knew, a title I had previously thought belonged to her. I didn't confront her that night. nor the next morning when I left for the cleaning job at 4 a.m. Instead, I wore my exhaustion like armor. I let my shoulders slump a little lower, made my size a little heavier, and continued to dutifully report on my earnings. But the game had changed. Monday morning, instead of walking into the community bank to deposit my checks into our joint medical relief account, I took a bus 3 towns over. I sat in a cold plastic chair at a branch where no one knew my name or my mother's tragic story. I opened a solo account, a secret vault for my freedom. When I received my pay from the retail store and the data entry firm, not a single penny touched the account she could monitor. To keep her from panicking, I moved tiny, insignificant amounts, just enough to cover the essentials she insisted on, while telling her the hospital had moved to a new, more aggressive billing cycle that required direct wire transfers. She was so preoccupied with Big Al's mounting threats that she didn't even check the math. She just nodded, her eyes already drifting to the racing forms hidden inside her crossword books. The trap was set on a Wednesday evening, the air thick with the smell of a storm. I came home and practically burst through the door, a fake glow of excitement on my face. I told her I'd been summoned to the corporate office of the retail chain. "Mom, you won't believe it," I gushed, kneeling by her chair and taking her hand. "They're promoting me to regional coordinator. There's a $15,000 signing bonus. It hits my account on Friday." The way her pupils dilated was chilling. She didn't ask if the job would be less stressful or if I could finally sleep. She simply squeezed my hand, her mind clearly tallying the digits. "Oh, Sarah," she breathed, her voice thick with a greed she could barely mask as pride. "God is finally looking out for us. This could pay for that new Swiss treatment, the one I told you about." I watched her like a hawk for the rest of the night. The moment I pretended to fall asleep on the sofa, I heard the frantic tapping of her fingernails on her phone screen. Through the crack of my eyelids, I saw the blue light illuminating her face as she messaged Big Al. She wasn't just paying him back, she was doubling down. She told him she was coming into a windfall, and wanted to place a massive credit bet on a high-stakes trifecta on Saturday. She was betting money that didn't exist, backed by a bonus that was nothing more than a ghost. I felt a cold, sharp satisfaction. I wasn't just leaving, I was ensuring that when I left, the house of cards she'd built would bury her. Saturday arrived with a bright, mocking sun. It was the day she supposedly had her biopsy follow-up. I kissed her forehead and gave her $50 for a luxury car service to the clinic, watching her limp toward the door with theatrical effort. The second the car pulled away, likely headed straight to the off-track betting parlor, I moved with a speed I hadn't possessed in years. I didn't take much. I didn't want the furniture or the memories. I packed my clothes, my few books, and the legal documents I'd been hiding. I spent the next 2 hours in a fever of cold efficiency. I cleared the kitchen table and began the exhibit. In the center, I placed the printed transcripts of her text to Big Al, the ATM comments highlighted in a neon yellow that matched her fake medical folders. Around it, I fanned out the actual gambling debts I'd tracked down and the letters from the insurance company stating she hadn't been a patient in years. The final touch was a simple floral, "Get well soon" card. Inside I wrote, "The cancer is cured. The ATM is out of order. Don't look for me." By the time I crossed the state line, the city skyline was a jagged memory in my rearview mirror. My old phone, the one she had the number for, sat on the passenger seat like a live grenade. It stayed silent for hours until the third race at the track must have ended. Then it exploded. The screen lit up. Boom, boom, boom. I let it ring. I wanted her to feel the silence I had lived in for 3 years. On the 10th call, I pulled into a rest stop overlooking a quiet valley and finally swiped the screen. Her voice was a jagged shriek, all pretense of frailty gone. "Sarah, where are you?" The bonus didn't hit. "Big Al is at the house. He's saying the account is empty." "I can't pay him, Sarah. I'm sick. I'm dying, you ungrateful." "You sound remarkably healthy for someone with stage 3, Marge," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. The use of her first name silenced her for a heartbeat. "I hope Big Al likes the ATM joke. I left a copy of that text for him on the porch. I think he'll find it as funny as you did." "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I'm your mother." "A mother protects her child," I replied, looking at my own reflection in the window, a woman who was finally breathing. "You were just a debt I finally paid off. Goodbye, Marge." I took the SIM card out, snapped it in half and tossed it into a trash bin. The silence that followed was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. 3 weeks later, I sat on a weathered wooden bench in a small coastal town 300 miles away. The air tasted of salt and possibilities. I had a small apartment, a single job with a steady paycheck and a schedule that included 8 hours of sleep. I held a cup of coffee in my hands, the expensive kind with the foam and the sprinkle of cinnamon, and I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt for spending the $5. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the waves in shades of bruised purple and gold. I thought about the 3 years I'd lost, the health I'd sacrificed, and the mother I thought I had. I realized then that I hadn't just survived a betrayal. I had performed my own surgery. I had cut out the rot that was destroying my life. As the first sip of warm coffee hit my tongue, I leaned back and closed my eyes. The weight was gone. For the first time in my life, I wasn't anyone's hero and I wasn't anyone's fool. I was just Sarah. And that was more than enough.